Everyone, thanks so much for checking out the video today. My name is Travis, and before we get into kind of our topic for today, I want to let you know no email, no video next week. Family's on fall break, and so hopefully, as long as everything goes well, as long as there's no hurricanes or any craziness within the Gulf, we're going to be on a cruise ship headed towards Mexico, and so we're going to enjoy a little bit of downtime during a busy season right now, and so I'm looking forward to that. But we'll get back in when I get back. All right. Today's topic is probably going to be a little uncomfortable for some people. Um, it just is. I don't think there's any way around it. And one of the things, as we've been doing this Reclaiming Glory group, which is a revitalization group, and talking about some of the things um, that you have to deal with when it comes to revitalizing a church. And a lot of times, a big part of what holds back a church from what's unhealthy within a church is this. Sorry, a car going by. Is this idea of people don't want to let go of control. And so I asked the question in last week's video, and I said, how can we as pastors keep from becoming the type of people who value control over the growth of God's kingdom? Because, I mean, honestly, like that's what often happens is that uh, the things that need to happen within a church to help a church live on mission, grow, see people come to Christ, see people baptized, see people disciple, the things that need to happen a lot of times that are going to make that happen and make that possible means that we have to give up control of something that we love or something that we enjoy or something that is just this is how it's been and this is how it needs to be and this is how it always is. Um, how can we become people who are actively listening to God's voice um, and are obedient to it? How can we keep from becoming control freaks as us as pastors? Because we are certainly not immune from it. I'm certainly not immune from it. None of us like change. Uh, Even in the church where it's like this is my church. This is the church I've grown up in. This is the church I pastor or I lead a ministry in. Even when you stay, if you stay in a church long enough, like I've been in a church long enough now, that the things that we sort of fought for 10, 15 years ago, maybe, the changes that um, I was for, let's say that, um, now, now some of those things may be changing again, or they've changed over the years, changing again to a direction that, you know what, is not my preference, um, but it's what's best for the church, and it's what's best for growing God's kingdom. So I've become to a place now where even for me, it's this isn't what I like, but I also have to realize it's not about me. But again, none of us are immune. But so, what are some of the steps that we could take, especially as pastors, to try to keep from wanting to hold on to that control? And here's a few things that I thought of, and I'd love to hear your thoughts as well. But the few things I thought of was number one, we can't get our identities wrapped up in, well, I'm the pastor, and that's who I am, and that's how I view myself. I mean, everybody calls me pastor, um, and if I'm not the pastor, or if I'm not a pastor, well, who am I? Where does my worth come from? And I'm sure we, um, I'm sure we're smart enough to realize that our worth comes from Christ, and our worth comes from being children of God. But once you've done something for so long, for years and years and years, for many, maybe all of your almost all of your life. I mean, this is what you've been. It's really hard uh, not to get our identity wrapped up in that, and that's who I am. And so, if I'm not the pastor, then what gives me meaning? Um, because for every one of us, there's going to come a time within our so let's say professional ministry lives, um, when God's going to call us um, to basically give up that position. When God's going to let us know that the best thing for the church, um, is for us to step out of our pastor position. Again, I said this was going to be uncomfortable today for some of us, right? Um, and I'm not just talking to those who are at that age where they're thinking about retirement, they're thinking about transition and those type of things. I want us to think about this, um, from the very beginning, from an early age. I want us to all, but because all of us, hopefully, we're going to stay in ministry long enough where this is going to be a conversation that we have to think through and we have to deal with, and so we need to learn how to do it in a healthy way. And so we want to get our identities wrapped up in, well, if I'm not a pastor, then who am I? To kind of, again, to kind of go along with the same thought, I put the second thing would be we can't get our sense of worth from people. Um, Happens all the time. And pastors go through a lot of things, and they go through things where, there's people within the church who may not like them, or there's conflict that we have to deal with, and all those things. But there's part of being a pastor, um, where you know what you're looked upon highly. You're called on a lot. Like you're seen as an expert in things. Like you're a lot of things to a lot of people. And so a lot of times we can get our self-worth from that. I mean, we every one of us, again, none of us are immune. We enjoy the pats on the back. We enjoy man, that was a great sermon today. Man, when you came and visited us or visited my family member in the hospital, man, that really meant a ton to us. Or um, man, you preached a beautiful funeral. Thank you so much for doing that. And we can get our sense of worth from really compliments from people. And and we and it can do something within us if we're not careful, where we sort of feed off of that a little bit. And again, um, and when that happens, it can be hard to listen to God and follow God's instruction and what God's telling us to do, because we're worried about the people and what some of the people, and we don't want to hurt their feelings. We don't want to let them down. We don't want to do anything that may cause people not to like us. And so that's another thing that we can deal with. Um, the third thing is this: we can live out our calling, um, and minister to people without having to have a position in the church. I know that's, let me say that again. We can live out our calling and minister to people without having to be the pastor, without having to have a position in our church. Just because we're the children's ministry leader, or we're on staff, or we're the worship pastor, or whatever it might mean. Um, just because we're that doesn't make us special, doesn't make us any different from anybody else um, who's given their lives to Christ. All of us are called into serving and called to minister to people. All of us are called to make disciples and to witness to people. All of us have a ministry, and just because maybe um, I'm not a pastor now or whatever it might be, I used to work at a church, now I work at somewhere else. It doesn't mean our ministry stops. It may mean our ministry looks differently, um, but we're still called to minister to people. We're still called to love people, to serve people, all of these things. And so we can do that. Again, we can do that without a position, without having to be on staff at a church, without having to be the pastor. Um, Again, and all these kind of flow along with each other, from a sense of identity, from a sense of worth, from feeding off people, all these things. Um, we don't have to do that. Our ministry is bigger than just what happens um, inside of the church building or inside of the church walls. Like our ministry is our entire lives, no matter where we work. And the last thing I'll say, and all this again, it ties together, I believe, is that we have to take control, and especially for those who are younger, listening to this. Uh, this is really valuable. You need to listen here. We need to take control and ownership of our financial well-being. We need to take control and ownership of our financial well-being, because if not, we can get ourselves to a place where we haven't made that a priority. We haven't focused on that. We haven't made wise decisions when it comes to our finances and our money. And we get to a place later on in life where either we can't afford to retire, or we can't afford to not be the pastor anymore, um, all of these things. Or we can't afford to um, risk making a church or a congregation angry at us, where they may actually fire us or let us go as a pastor, because we're worried about, like, if I don't have that paycheck, then what are we going to do? And this is all I know how to do, um, which is not true. Um, but that's how we can think, and that's how we can feel. And I know conversations, I've heard conversations for pastors who said, um, pastors who are way past retirement age, who are in their 80s even, who are still pastoring a church because they say, I can't afford to not do this. Um, it's not even about calling anymore. It's just I can't afford to. It's about, like, I have to do this to live. Um, and so we have to take care of our financial well-being. We have to be smart. We have to be wise when it comes to that, so that, and this is throughout life. It's not even about. I mean, a huge part of it's transition, right? But it's no matter what. If God calls me to the mission field, or if God calls me um, to a small church that can't afford a full-time pastor, and that's where it's going to be bivocational. Um, am I going to be willing to say yes to that? Am I going to be in a position to say yes to it? The decisions that we make a lot of times when it comes to our finances and those type things play a huge role in the things that we're able to say yes to, if we're honest. And so those are a few thoughts of mine about, like, how can we become people who are, especially pastors and church leaders, who um, who can be free to make decisions and free to follow God's lead. Um, that we're not worried about, like, we have to control everything because our identity is tied up into this, or we can't afford not to be doing this, or I don't know what else I would be doing. If I'm not a pastor, then what does ministry even look like for me? Um, and so I'd love to hear your thoughts about this as well. All right. Thanks so much for watching. Hope you guys have a great week, and I'll talk to you when I get back from vacation.